Kris Clink is the author of Goodbye, Lark, Lovejoy, and Sissie Klein is Completely Normal, which have received praise from Bustle, Midwest Book Review, Kirkus Reviews, Women.com, Lone Star Literary, Brit Co, Travel and Leisure Magazine, and Entertainment Weekly, among others. Those are some pretty big names. Set in Middle America, her novels are laced with love, heartbreak, and just enough snark to rock the boat for the relatable characters as they confront transformative challenges. Welcome to the podcast, Kris Clink.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I have to say, just reading that description, it sounds like a country song: love, heartbreak, and snark.
Well, I'm from Texas. I live in Kansas now, but I spent the first 48 years in Texas. So probably a little bit of my DNA coming from Texas. But
A little bit of country. Are you?
Sounds like a country western song.
Are you a country music lover by any chance, or?
I like all music, but yes, I am Willie Nelson's biggest fan, like hands down. I don't know what other people think they are, but I am. But I like a lot of people, so I like a lot of music.
Yeah, he was just out here, I want to say in August, September, for Farm Aid. So I'm in Connecticut, yeah. And he brought Farm Aid. He and John Cougar Mellencamp, or is it John Cougar, or is it John Mellencamp? I don't know what he goes by these days, but they were both here with a bunch of other people as well. I did not go to the show, but I heard it was fantastic because I had some friends who went.
I love him. I've been to, I don't even know. I don't know, 10 concerts, maybe more. I don't know. But
when we were, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I have 3 of his bandanas. You know, he signs the bandanas and passes them out. So I've got 3 of those. They're my prized possessions.
When we were kids, my father had he had a company car, and it was an Oldsmobile, and it was a new Oldsmobile, and it came with a tape of driving tunes. First track on side A of the Oldsmobile driving tape, On the Road Again, and we listened to that quite a bit. We used to take a lot of road trips as a family, so I will always remember Willie Nelson for On the Road Again.
I'm surprised it wasn't what's the song I'm thinking of? Roll Me Up and Smoke Me When I Die.
Well,
that would have made an impression.
That would, well, I don't think Don Carlin would have appreciated that as much, but his offspring later in life might have. You never know. What a great, it's funny. I watched a documentary on Amazon last night about Nashville. I'm actually going to Nashville next week for some business, and it was around singer-songwriters in Nashville, and they did mention Willie Nelson as part of that, and but fascinating. He's a great musician, great songwriter. I mean, he is absolutely one of the best.
I agree.
So I always like to say that this is about uncorking the stories behind the stories. So Kris, I'm really curious, where does your story as an author begin?
Oh gosh, it begins a long time ago. I was in elementary school. I knew early on I had 2 fabulous elementary teachers. They didn't call it English, they called it language arts. And I knew then that they gave me the confidence to know that I could do anything, but they told me I was a good writer, and I believed them. And maybe I was a terrible writer, and they just, whatever, I figured out how to get there. But maybe I'm still a terrible writer. Who knows? But anyway, no, I hope not. When I got my first arcs, though, from the first book, the first 2 books that came out of the box, one went to one teacher, one of those teachers, one went to the other. Those were the first 2. So I always knew I was going to write. I tried to write. I didn't want to go to, when I was in college, I was a communications major. I've got 2 degrees in communications, but I thought about doing English, but I didn't want to have to study Chaucer and stuff I don't want to read. You want to read what you want to read. And I didn't really see the value of reading that, which is terrible because there is value in all literature. But I was very impatient. And then when Grisham, and I'm trying to think of who else came out, like Grisham came out, there were some of those that came out that I remember listening to the audiobooks thinking, oh, I want to do this. I want to do this. But when I tried, it was bad. It was really bad. And I had little kids, and I thought, I don't know that I just can't do it with little kids. And so for years, my husband and I joked about when I write this book. And in 2008, we went down to San Antonio, and our daughter was there doing a musical, and she said, I've got to take you over to Green, Texas. and you've got to see this little town. And I'm like, okay, well, we go eat at the grist mill, which over there's a big deck that overlooks the Guadalupe, and where people are tubing down the Guadalupe. And next door is the Green Dance Hall, which is one of the oldest existing dance halls in the country. And it's like 2 p.m. She's like, we got to go in there and just look. And, I've got my younger kids with me. I'm like, okay, well, I didn't realize it's not that kind of a, it's not like a bar. It is in the evenings, but during the day, it's more touristy. And I walked in and the boards gave under my feet. And I said to my husband, I don't know what the story is going to be when I write it, but when I write it, part of it's going to happen here. That was 2008, I think. I didn't start writing that story until 2015, and it was published last April. That was the Lark Lovejoy book. And that was because when I was 46, my husband said, Christy, when are you going to write that book? I'm 51 now, so
yeah.
It took me a while, but so anyway, that's that's how I got here.
Well, let's take a trip back. If we got into our DeLorean, hit 88 miles an hour like we do in Back to the Future, those elementary school days, what were you writing? What was do you remember what you were writing that was impressing your teacher so much?
I really don't. I honestly, I mean, you make little books and, with the yarn and at the time you think it's the greatest thing ever. And I'm sure it's in a moth-filled box somewhere, in the attic or got tossed out or something. But I really don't remember what I wrote. I remember what I read. I remember books that I read that I loved. I don't remember what I wrote.
But you had that spark. It seems like, your teachers, they ignited that spark. And that's something I hear quite a bit from authors is that, they knew, even if they didn't pursue it intentionally as a career later in life, meaning kind of when they went to college or university, that they had somebody in their life, and usually it's a teacher, who encouraged them at some point in time. And I'm just curious as to how important you think encouragement is, to young people in the writing process.
Oh, I think it's extremely valuable. Writing is it's a solitary work. I mean, it's you're by yourself. These stories happen in your head and they're so personal, and even though you're writing it, fiction, you write about other people, it still feels so personal that it's kind of scary to share it with people. I think I went almost a year without telling people, outside of my close-knit family and friends, what I was doing. I didn't want people to know. And it was almost like coming out like, oh, okay, I've written this book, and I waited like for them to throw something or say, are you crazy? And, some of them did. I had one person tell me, you realize it's like, you have a greater chance of like getting struck by lightning and getting that thing published. And I was like, oh, that's why people need encouragement, because they don't want to tell people that they're writers, because the odds are stacked so far against us that it's scary. And so you take this personal thing and go, here, beat me up for it. Here's this book I wrote.
Yeah. I mean, not to get all Brene Brown on us, but it does take a fair amount of vulnerability to tell somebody, hey, I've written something and I think it's worthy of being published. I mean, it takes vulnerability. It also takes a little bit of ego and a dash of confidence as well, to actually, dream up something that you think other people may want to read. So no, I totally hear what you're saying. Even though we write fiction and that's what I write as well. I mean, I do write a fair amount of marketing stuff that's nonfiction, but that's not all that exciting. There's always a little piece of your person that goes into these stories. And I find that my friends are always asking, or family members, or now, people who reach out to me on social media saying, how much of this story is actually your true life? And I'm like, you'd be surprised to find out that maybe 10 to 20% is real, but the rest is all imagination. I've never been to Hawaii, although I've had characters who have had many adventures there.
Well, like when we were talking before you started recording about different things our parents said, I have some notes here that I was jotting down so that I can put those in my little spreadsheet. I have a spreadsheet so I can remember things like that when I'm looking for something creative. I mean, what you hear and what you see is your story, is part of your, becomes part of your story. That's just the way it works.
Yeah, yeah, it's all experience. So you obviously did not pursue writing as a career, as your first career. Um, even though you had a passion for it, you recognized it when you're younger. When you did go to college, what was your dream? Like, what did you want to be when you grew up? What was your plan?
My plan, what my dream was that I would do some other things that were fun, and then I would write books because I thought I probably needed some life experience. And so I taught at the college level. I taught communications classes. I did a lot of marketing. You talked about doing the nonfiction work that, the stuff that you don't get your name on, that, your company asks you to write, all the technical writing stuff. I did technical writing stuff for pretty much everybody I worked for. And my last job, I was the district, or the a regional, not regional, a branch manager for the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation for the top 51 counties. And so there was a ton of technical writing with that. I mean, basically you needed to tell the stories without telling the story of this particular child, which sometimes the parents let us do that. But, a lot of times it was telling the story of those children. So people, you'd bring awareness, you'd bring donations, to support the research. And so there was a lot of that. And I just had always had that craving to write fiction. And so that was, but it did help to get all that life experience. It really did. There's a lot of things I don't think I could have written about if I hadn't gone through all of that.
Yeah, might come across as almost inauthentic, which is the kiss of death. But I hear what you're saying. I had a very long career and still have a career in marketing. And when I'm self-employed now, but when I was working for employers, I always wound up, even though it was never in my title, I always wound up writing newsletters for the company, like internal newsletters or sometimes client-facing newsletters. Without a doubt, like it always happened. Like it always found, like that assignment, that special project always found its way to me. And that's what eventually got me thinking, hey, I guess I'm pretty good at this. And, I'd like to scratch the itch of writing fiction. But tell me about this series. So I know you've got 2 books. They're both part of a series. What was the impetus for the series?
It was that day in green. I wanted to do something that felt right with that I could draw a picture around that scene, and that's kind of how it started. But for a couple of years before I started writing full time, before I quit my job to write, when I would watch movies or I would read books, I would think about, this is especially movies, I'd think, hope floats. I remember saying
Birdie Calvert.
Birdie Cat. Oh, I love Birdie. But I wanted people to, when they finished one of my books, I don't want it to, I don't write Southern fiction, even though they take place in Texas. I just finished writing a book that's set in Kansas too. But I don't want it to be, I don't want to be branded as Southern fiction, but I want people to feel the way that I felt when I finished that movie. That all the pieces are wrapped up in that, these flawed characters, even the ones that in the beginning of the movie you don't like, you start to see some value in them. And that was really what I wanted to do with that first book that I wrote.
Yeah. Yeah. I just have to pause here for a second on Hope Floats, because my wife and I saw that movie before we were married. And of course, I can't remember where it is in the movie. I think it's at the end. To Make You Feel My Love is on the soundtrack. Of course, written by Bob Dylan, recorded by Bob Dylan, Billy Joel,
Garth Brooks.
And I think Adele now has a cut of it, but we use the Garth Brooks version as our wedding song.
Oh, I love that. I actually bought the soundtrack after I saw the movie the first time. I said we had to go to Hastings and get the soundtrack.
Yeah, it's a great one. So you want to give people kind of a feeling of what it's like to kind of grow up where you grow up, and just having traveled. I mean, I've been fortunate enough to travel to more states in this country than I've not. And, I'm based here just outside of New York City in a suburb in Connecticut. And, if you've never traveled through sort of the heartland of the country, you're missing, I believe anyway, like you're missing like a huge, swath of what America really is, because America really isn't New York and America really isn't Los Angeles. It is pretty much everything in between. And it's hard to kind of really paint a picture of what the Midwest is like if you haven't been there. But it sounds like you're trying to do that with your work.
Yeah, and it's funny you bring that up because in the first book, the Lark Lovejoy character, her life changed. We kind of get to know her, and then we find out how her life changed on 9/11. And that was when she decided she'd been going to school. She was majoring in viticulture. She was going to be a winemaker, but after 9/11, she'd had a bad experience the summer prior at an internship in Calistoga. And so she chickened out. And then at the same time, there's a male character that their stories cross. And he has recently returned from Afghanistan. He lost his leg in an IED incident. And so both of them have PTSD for different reasons. She does because she lost her husband. But both of them, when they talk about 9/11, they talk about where they were that day. Both of them are from Texas, but he was like in 5th grade and she was in college. She's older than he is. Mm-hmm. And when I was writing this book, when I was going through edits, I was working with this incredible editor, Laura Ross out of New York. And she asked me, she's like, were people really this affected because I really tried to draw that picture of how, I think the male character says something about how he imagined it was like a cloud, like that ash cloud, and how that cloud crossed and kind of went west and dropped little pieces on every state as it went west, and how it affected them in different ways. And what it made me do is I went back and like got on Facebook and started looking at everybody who was of different ages and asked them, where were you on 9/11? Did your teachers come talk to you? What was it? And so then I just kind of doubled down on that to make sure that I painted that picture even clearer, to show that, it was horrible if you were in New York City, no doubt. But it was pretty bad in Amarillo, Texas, where I was, or Dallas, or, wherever you were. And so we're all, I think that's one of the things I tried to get across in my books too, is that we're all more alike than we are dissimilar. And I think depending on, people, oh, you're from New York, oh, we're not alike. And I find you to be a very pleasant, very nice person, a lot of fun. So, we're all more alike than we are dissimilar. And I think that's something we need to be reminded of sometimes.
And I think that's the role of art. That's the role of kind of what we do as writers, is to really build empathy for people, and just kind of expose, people to people they haven't met yet. And so, yeah, no, I think that's awesome. So tell me about this, the second book, the book forthcoming release, November 9th. Sissie Klein is Completely Normal. I'm curious about the title here. What can you tell me about the book?
Well, the book is kind of a little bit of an irony, is because Sissie doesn't know what normal is. I mean, normal to her is what her mother says it is. And usually that means that something's gone awry, and her mom says, oh, well, that's just normal. And that's her way of, putting a little whipped cream and sprinkles on it and calling it normal. It's all okay. And there's some things that happen, like Sissie gets pregnant when she's 16. That is not normal, despite her mother telling her it is. And so, but when you're 16, you're a little bit numb to what the real world is like. And when your mama's telling you this, you want to believe her, you want to trust her. And so she kind of clung to that. And there was a character in the first book, that a guy that was just obnoxious, and I still don't like him, but we see his wife in 2 scenes, and we kind of feel sorry for his wife, and we wonder if there was some abuse. And I started writing the second book about a different character, and I kept going back to that character, that woman, and I wanted to know, why was she married to him, and why did she stay with him? I mean, her parents were pretty well-to-do, so it wasn't a matter of needing means. She was very attractive, smart girl. What was it? And so I kind of did a little bit of a character study and dug into that. And when I did, I found a fascinating story that I didn't even know. And so that was Sissie Klein's story.
Interesting. So is Sissie Klein I'm sorry to be thick-headed, but is she the spouse in the
She's the
previous?
spouse of the thick-headed guy. Well,
Yeah.
he's worse than thick-headed. He's not a nice guy. But we find out why. And that's the other thing that was kind of fun, is we find out what his story is and how he landed in that position. And he has some family, not to excuse his behavior, but he has, we're all the product of the way we were raised to some degree, and he was. But then about midway through the story, something tragic happens, and it really unfolds everything that Sissie thought she knew about him, about her family, and really about herself. And it gives her a new shot at life. And as hard as it is, she gets to redesign things the way she wants them.
See, that's one of the things I love about writing is that I mean, I typically go into a new project with some idea. I mean, obviously I have a spark, which then, won't leave me. Even though if I tell, I'll tell my wife, I'm taking a break. I'm not, no more writing. She's like, great. I'll have you around at nights again. And, but then like it'll hit, an idea will come to me and then I'll outline it. So I always start, that's usually my process where I'll outline the story. I'll know where it's going. I know where the beats are. But even though I have that outline, I always find that when I'm writing, I learn something like it's like curveballs come at me. Like I'm like, oh, you know what? It's really not going to happen this way, or this character, this something really bad happened to them, and we need to kind of follow up on that or whatever. So it sounds like you too kind of have this sort of process where you're kind of, I don't want to say discovering as you're going along, but you're kind of learning about these characters as you kind of create them, and that's kind of fun, isn't it?
Oh, it's so fun. I mean, it's like, you meet a new person and they're not going to tell you all their secrets the first day, but when you know them for 3 or 4 years, you know a lot about them. And that's how it is when you're writing their story. You start out, you think you know who they are, you know what they look like, you know what kind of car they drive, those are the easy parts. It's what makes them tick? And that's what's fun.
Yeah.
Finding out what that thing was that happened when they were 10 years old that made them, forever afraid of dogs, whatever it is. There's just always, I don't have a character that happened to, but there's always something.
Oh, I'm just fascinated by like the sort of emotional maturity it takes to like really craft a well-rounded character. Cause our characters have to be interesting. And in many cases, interesting characters don't have to be likable. I mean, you just mentioned kind of in the first book, I know we've been talking about how this character, we learn more about him in the second book, but you don't like him in the first book, it sounds like. But it's important to write characters that you don't like, because there needs to be some kind of tension somewhere, or else it's, the stories kind of fall flat. What's your approach to writing characters that you don't like or who are unlikable? And I ask that because it seems in popular culture today, our new heroes are anti-heroes who are extremely unlikable people. I think of the Don Drapers of the world, and there's a host of others, the Walter Whites, people who do really bad things. But we root for them somehow. What do you have an approach for writing characters like that?
I love writing characters like that. I love making it, because I don't want, you don't want your bad guys to be two-dimensional cartoon characters. You want to find out, what makes them tick, how they got there, without putting it on the page in the first 2 chapters. You want to unwrap that. And so I do, when I know somebody's going to be a bad guy, I don't know what their bad guy story is, how they arrived there, but I do. It's in the works from the very beginning. What is it? And I'm just kind of letting it stew. And then it's amazing, by about a third the way through the book, it clicks, what their story is and how we got there. With Caleb, the husband of Sissie, I knew he was kind of he'd let himself go, and he was drinking too much, and he was way flirty with this woman that was not interested in him. And at the time, he and Sissie were separated in the first book. And so he was a little cartoony. And I think that was one of the reasons why it was fun to go back and write their story, because I felt like it was a little bit like saying, okay, here's the bad guy. Okay, now we did this. Now we pushed him out of the way. He's gone. And he was gone. But to be able to pull him back and really show, the good and the bad. And he was a good dad. He was a great dad. And so there's that. And we're not necessarily the sum of our parts. You don't want to say, oh, well, he's a good dad, so that excuses everything, or he's a drunk, and so that makes him not be a good dad. So it's just really fun to draw those pictures and really, see where the shading happens.
Right. But uncovering the whys and giving your readers the whys it's a real gift. It's a real gift to help them understand who this character is, because, characters without some kind of arc are just kind of ho hum, and they're kind of ho hum. I'm curious as to, now that you've got 2 publications kind of under your belt, what do you love most about writing? What really fuels your passion for it?
Okay, which thing? I mean, I love drawing the pictures. I love, making the world fair, because, we've all met people that the world is just dumped on them, and it keeps going, and, and it's just nice to see the underdogs come out ahead, and see the bad people realize that, they've done something bad, and we get to move our little people around, and we get to make that bad guy come around and say, I should have been better. And I think that's really fun, because I want to think that at the end of the day, when someone is unkind to someone else, that at the end of the day, they recognize that and feel bad about it. I want to think that. I know that's probably not, I'm being naive, but in books, on some level, we can make that happen. Even if it's, we drop a house on the bad guy, and then it's fair.
I have to say, I love the escapist nature of writing, because, like you're saying, you can create a world. You can create a world where your rules apply, and life, for many of us adults, our rules don't apply. I mean, I have, I was married with 3 kids by the time I was 27. So I had a lot of responsibility thrust upon me at a very young age. And now I'm an empty nester. I'm trying to find my way through that, to be quite honest with you, because it is a very strange experience. I don't know, as a dad, I was extremely involved. I mean, I was at everything, kind of pulling probably more than, my fair share, if we're being honest. But now that they're gone and in college, it's like, I don't know what to do with myself anymore. But I had a lot of constraints, I should say. I wasn't like tied up or anything.
That's another story.
Yeah, that's for the
I write a different podcast.
I was gonna say, I write those stories under a pseudonym. No, I had some constraints in my life, and now it's like, but when I was writing, and I was writing since my kids have been little, I was able to like join a world where I didn't have these constraints, and I could go on these adventures, even though I couldn't really go on these adventures, but in my world I could. And I got to really, live, cathartically, is that the right word? Through these characters, and I could, kind of build a new world for myself. I mean, not that you asked, but that's,
no, it's totally interesting. I mean, I love hearing what other authors, what brought them to writing, and what makes them stay there.
Yeah. So tell me about your path to publishing, the first one. How did you, we were talking before about, somebody says, hey, you have more of a chance of getting struck by lightning, or, whatever, than getting something published. What was your process to getting this work of art into the world?
Oh, Lord, it was a long and wonky one. I had, I finished that first draft of that book, and despite not wanting to tell anybody I was writing, as soon as I was done with it, within like an hour, I sent off a query letter, which was, mistake number 1 of millions. But a couple years later, I'm working with a professional editor, and I'm starting to realize all the things that I did wrong. And I'm starting to, have conversations with agents that I'm seriously considering, and they're seriously considering me. And, there were a couple of them that we went, we were doing R&Rs back and forth for 2 years, one of them almost 3 years. And it was getting to where I felt like, okay, on one hand, I felt like the work was so much better with their feedback, and their recommendations made the book so much better. But then I felt like just something in my gut said, we're there. This is it. This is where it is. And I was still kind of getting that, let's tweak this, let's tweak that. And I felt like some of it might be just more of the regionalization, that I knew what happened in that part of Texas. And that's the way I wanted to tell the story. And I didn't know, I don't know, I can't be in everybody else's head, but I felt like that was the feedback where it was motivated. And a friend of mine had published with Spark Press, which is a hybrid press, which, it's not like they publish anything that comes to them, but, they vet it. And with mine, they even looked at it and said, okay, but we think this still needs another good edit. And so I was coming up on, at the time, I think it was coming up on 50. And I felt like, dang, I'm going to be 900 by the time I get my first book published. I just felt, I'd quit my job. And I was doing it. My husband said, you're working more now as a writer than you were when you were working, 50, 60 hours a week. And so I felt like I was all in, but I needed to get this thing published, the first one published. I just felt like it was ready. And so we did that. And I talked to Spark Press about making it into a sequel, not a sequel, a series. And so the second one is coming out with Spark Press as well. And they've been amazing to work with. Their editing team is great. Their distribution model is fabulous. And so I really felt like I needed that. I didn't want to go it alone and go straight indie. I just didn't feel like I knew enough about the distribution and that piece. Now I did produce the audiobook on both of these. I hired it out, but I did that. And that was, even that is a lot of work.
Oh, sure is.
Oh boy. But so anyway, it was, those were both good experiences, and I don't know what I'm going to do moving on. I've talked to Spark Press about doing a third book in the series. And then I also have a couple other things, blowing around in the wind that I'm looking at other options on too. So,
I think, every now and then I'll talk to an author who tell me, hey, I wrote this book and I sent it out to one agent and they signed me immediately.
Oh, yeah.
There was a bidding war and she's 24 and I want to jump through the screen and I want to choke somebody. But that's the exception to the rule. It does happen. But I don't think what most people realize is that the publishing world, the traditional sort of publishing world, moves at an incredibly slow pace. And there are some old rules. And for someone like me who grew up in this world of, like, I cut my teeth in marketing in the 90s doing interactive work, and we were making stuff up as we went along. It was the Wild West.
Yeah.
But because of that, like, I had zero tolerance for I hate to say it, for BS and for old rules, because I don't think old rules apply anymore. So I always like to say that, indie publishers or hybrid publishers, we're kind of like pirates. We have a pirate ship. We can steer the ship. And if you do it right and, you get yourself a great editor, the distribution stuff you can figure out. The production stuff you can figure out. You really can produce at a faster pace and build a following pretty quickly. Now it takes a lot of guerrilla tactics, if you can even use that term anymore, but it can be very rewarding at the same time. But I don't have, like you, you're saying, you're going to be 900 before the first one comes out. I don't have the patience for it. And it's form letter after form letter coming from agents who'd never want to take a chance on you. And I'm not saying that that's the wrong way to go for other authors. It just, it certainly wasn't the way that I went as well. So.
But I think it was fortunate. My timing was fortunate because when I had been accepted by Spark Press and we started down this road, I didn't know COVID was going to happen. None of us did. And when COVID happened, so many contracts got postponed. Their pub date that was supposed to happen in 2020 or 2021 turned out to be, now they're at 2022. And so for that reason alone, it was a huge boon, because a lot of my friends, their books didn't go out on time and mine did. But also, I had friends that had signed with, some of them with big publishers, who warned me that, you think you're going to be in Target. You think you're going to be in, all these different places. But when it comes down to it, if that publishing house, they've only got so much in the way of resources, and they're handling your PR. So you've got to remember that you could end up being down at the very end when it came to the priority list for who gets PR. And so that was one of the reasons I wanted to go with a hybrid publisher, because I thought, okay, I'll work with a PR, with a publicist, and then they'll do the book part. And then I don't need to worry about that, because that's going to be a variable that I don't need to worry about, because I know how much money is going to go out, and I know where they're going to place me. And so that's been something that, I think even if I had a traditional contract, I would probably still work with a publicist that I work with directly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want to talk about your podcast. So what is the name of the podcast, and what was the sort of the impetus for you to start one?
It is Kris Clink's Writing Table Podcast, because somebody already had one that has been kind of sitting dormant for a while. That's Writing Table Podcast. So, Kristen Higgins she writes women's fiction and has written some romance as well. And she's been a mentor and just a phenomenal lady and a good friend. But she talked to a lot of us early on when we would come around to the Romance Writers Association meetings and things like that. And she'd say, there's plenty of room at the table, meaning that writers don't need to compete against each other. Readers are going to read more than one book, and they're going to read the book they want. So it's not like, we're all fighting over that red car over there. There's going to be something for everybody. And so she was encouraging us to pay it forward the kindness that you get, but also, support each other. And I have been blown away at the support in the writing community. Other writers who you don't even know who you are, will send you a message and say, hey, good luck today on your release or whatever. And it's just so refreshing. If you've probably come from a world kind of like I did, with a lot of marketing and people, I worked with a lot of great people, but I've never worked with people like just one after another after another. It's atypical for someone not to be kind and not to be outrageously supportive and generous. And so that's where it came from. And I wanted to encourage that conversation that Kristen began. And I wanted to give people that like books a place to hear about, new books that are coming out, but also people that are considering writing or maybe starting out, so they can kind of get the behind the scenes of what went into that book, what everybody's writing journey looks like, because it's different for everybody. You brought up the 24-year-old that gets the contract and all. That is so rare. And so for a lot of us, we see that one and we're going, oh my gosh, I'm 51 years old. I still don't have an agent. What's wrong with me? And it's just different for everybody. And so I think that's a good reminder. And that's what I try to put forth in my podcast is, different examples of different authors. And I try to get, I had Lemony Snicket on not that long ago. I have, I actually interviewed Kristen Higgins last week for the first time, and out of like 50 episodes, that was the first. It won't air for a while, but it's just funny, the different authors. I've got, children's authors and sci-fi, and I try to do that because I want newbie writers to see that, there's something for everybody, and there's something to be learned from every author.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's amazing just the tips and tricks you pick up just by talking to people and just by listening to their stories and their journeys. And yeah, I mean, there's no two journeys that are alike, but there's absolutely some sort of insights you can glean from each of them. When imagine, for a moment, Kris, that you were kind of younger than you are now. You've been very generous in telling us your age, but and let's say you could write a letter to that younger self, and you could pick the age. It could be your 16-year-old self. It could be that child in grammar school who was, finding a passion for writing. It could be whatever. What would your letter to me be? That's my little Brad Paisley reference. But what's your letter to me? What would you tell your younger self about what life as a writer is going to be like?
I had when I was 29, I was diagnosed with MS. And I have two older sisters with it as well. And we've all done done pretty well. But it's a scary diagnosis when you first get it. And I remember thinking, I'm going to be in a wheelchair and I have these 2 kids and I'm not going to be able to do anything. And I hadn't finished graduate school then. I'd taken a little bit of grad school, taken off to have babies. And so my kids were like 2 and 4, I think, at the time. And I remember going and throwing my journals away. Back then you had paper journals. I remember throwing the journals that I'd saved away, thinking I'm not going to be able to do anything like that. And my husband took me to, I don't know like a Best Buy or whatever they were then, and bought me a laptop and said, "You've always wanted to write. Here's start writing." And I did. And like I told you, nothing I wrote will ever see the light of day. I mean, I found a box when I moved a couple of years ago of all this stuff that I'd written in, but I wish I could have told that girl who was in a cloud of, I don't walk right. I can't, I don't recognize my handwriting. Nothing was good at the time. I wish I could have told her to hang in there and hang on to that laptop and write all the crappy stories. Don't stop midway because you don't think it's good. Keep going, get to the end, and you're never going to publish that one, but you finished it and you learned a ton by finishing it. But when you don't finish it, you don't get it's like taking a class and dropping out midway. You really need to go from the idea, that nugget of an idea, to typing out all caps, the end. You get it. You get what goes into it. You get what was good and bad and ugly and, whatever. So that's really what I think I would tell her, is just to go back to that day, to that laptop, and keep writing. And because a couple of years from then, your walking isn't ever going to be that pretty, but you're going to do this, but it's going to take a while, and it's going to take a lot of practice.
Wow.
Not the walking, the writing.
The writing. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
That's powerful. It's a powerful lesson in there. Kind of not giving up and finishing what you started. It's almost like I was thinking about, like, people who are running a marathon and might quit, at mile 13 or something, not, and how you beat yourself up for not kind of finishing the race, granted there's no injuries or something like that, but
Right.
So what's next for you? What's next? So this book is coming out next week. What's coming up next, Kris?
Well, I just finished drafting, and it is an ugly draft, but it's one, when I finish a draft, I usually park it for a while and let it air out until the stink goes away. And then I go back to it with fresh eyes. And so I just finished one about a young lady who comes to Kansas thinks she's selling this estate that her dad has left her, and it needs a lot of work, and so she can't sell it until it has some structural problems. She can't sell it till it's fixed, and so it keeps her here for a while. And she learns about some family secrets, and she finds some journals of a woman that had lived in that house from the 20s to the 60s. So there's this whole family web of uncovered secrets, that kind of thing. And then I'm actually starting a new book now that I don't want to say too much about, because I don't know where it's going yet. So I just, it's NaNoWriMo month. And so I just started it, and we're going to see where it takes me. I'm going on a writing retreat. After my book comes out, I'm going on a writing retreat with 3 other authors, and I'm hoping that they will give me the inspiration and a little guidance on whether or not this is something that I ought to try. So,
well, that one you were talking about with the house that needs work and the journals, I mean, I'm smelling Hallmark Hall of Fame all over.
Well, Hallmark doesn't like books that have cuss words in them. And
well,
I know. So sorry, readers, just fair warned.
Maybe that's why they never turned any of mine into a into something for the small screen. I've tried. Believe me, I've tried. I guess they don't like certain themes. Those snobs. Well, this was fun. Thank you so much, Kris, for chatting with me.
Well, thank you, and thanks for telling the story about what happens behind the book and uncorking, all the nitty gritty behind the scenes.
all the nitty gritty, all the stuff that, it's the black box is what I call it. And what people
Yeah.
don't really get to see. But tell us on the 9th, when the book comes out, where can people buy Sissie Klein is Completely Normal?
They can buy it anywhere that books or audiobooks or ebooks are sold. And if your little local indie doesn't have it, don't give up on them. Just tell them what you want and they'll get it for you.
There you go. Got to support the indies.
Absolutely, we do. I go to Watermark Books in Wichita, Kansas is my favorite little indie, and they take great care of us. So.
Very good. Well, thank you so much, Kris, and I wish you all the best with the launch.
Thank you. You have a great day. It was really fun.